What if I told you right now, this very moment, that everything you believe about time might just be a well-crafted trick, an illusion so sophisticated that even the greatest scientists prefer not to question it so as not to face the abyss it hides? Think with me. Every memory you carry is something solid, every decision you consider unprecedented, every hope you place in the future. What if all of this were just a repetition, an echo that returns disguised as newness? This is the first fissure. I want to open in your thinking. If you feel your heart beat a little faster or your breath catch for a moment, don't be alarmed. It's a sign that this idea has already begun to touch an inner chord you've always suspected was there, hidden, but never dared to confront. Imagine hearing this not from a dreamy poet but from Nikola Tesla, one of the greatest geniuses to ever walk this earth. Tesla dared to assert that time is not linear, not a neat sequence of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. For him, time was like a vibrational field in which we are all trapped, repeating experiences without realizing it. He saw humanity as blindfolded travelers, convinced they are moving forward, when in fact they are merely spinning within an invisible circle. This is not just a philosophical provocation. It is an open wound that bleeds silently within the very fabric of our existence. Now take a deep breath and try to recall how many times you've felt like you've experienced that exact situation before. Not just a superficial déjà vu, but the feeling of replaying a familiar script, of constantly stumbling over the same mistakes, of repeating the same conflicts in relationships or even in your innermost thoughts. Have you ever wondered why this happens? Is it really a coincidence, or are we all trapped in a cycle so powerful that it makes us believe we're progressing when, in fact, we're actors reciting lines already rehearsed in previous lives? The discomfort of this question is inevitable. If time isn't a straight line, what does it mean to grow old? What does it mean to make a new decision? When you choose a path today, is it truly unprecedented? Or has a version of you at another point in the cycle already made the same choice? Tesla believed that nothing in the universe is isolated. Everything vibrates in invisible patterns of energy. This means that time isn't a solid entity, but a mechanism for adjusting these vibrations. A necessary convention, so that our limited minds don't get lost in the ocean of eternity. But here arises an even more disturbing conflict. If time is merely a vibrational field, then our lives don't move forward. They revolve in circles. And this idea, as frightening as it may be, explains something you've felt many times. The feeling of echoing within yourself, of being haunted by the same fears, of facing pain that seems endless. What happens when you realize that history isn't moving forward, but merely repeating itself under different guises? Notice how even the small signs of everyday life seem to reinforce this enigma. Déjà vu, for example, isn't just a lapse of memory. It's as if for a second the curtain of illusion rips open, and you realize you've already been there, said those words, felt that exact emotion. This moment disconcertingly reveals a truth we'd rather not admit. Perhaps there's nothing truly new happening. What if even your dreams, the ones in which you see scenes that later become reality, weren't mere coincidences, but vibrations from a parallel reality that already exists and merely resonates in your mind? Science, with its rigor, usually calls these memory failures statistical coincidences. But Tesla saw it differently. For him, human consciousness was an antenna. What we call the present is simply the tuning of this antenna to a specific frequency. Change the frequency, and you connect to another layer of reality. Sounds poetic? Perhaps. But it's also profoundly scientific, because the universe responds to patterns, not linear illusions. And then comes the nagging question: can we change our frequency? Or are we already doomed to vibrate in a range that keeps us spinning, unable to escape? If the answer is that we are trapped, then our freedom is just a show. But if the answer is that we can alter our vibration, then perhaps there is a way out, a path to break this cycle. Now imagine that every minute of your life isn't a unique moment, but a reflection of something that already happened elsewhere in the field. This calls into question the entire notion of free will. Do you truly decide, or are you simply reproducing what was already encoded? How many times have you promised to change, but fallen into the same pattern? How many times have you sworn to be different, but ended up back in the same place? This can't just be bad luck, it's vibration. It's a cycle. It's a prison. But Tesla didn't see this as just a curse. For him, repetition wasn't a punishment, but an opportunity. The cycle exists so that the conscious mind can awaken, so that we can perceive the invisible mechanism and, by perceiving it, finally change it. But until we reach this point, we live like sleepwalkers. We repeat not only gestures and decisions, but emotions. The same fear that holds you back today has held you back before. The same rage that consumes you now has burned within you at other points in the cycle. You think you're experiencing something new, but in reality, you're just re-experiencing old vibrations. And this leads us to a reflection that can be uncomfortable. If the past never dies, but continues to live now, silently shaping your steps, and if the future is not distant but already pulsating in this moment, then the present is not a solid instant. It is a fusion of vibrations, like invisible threads intertwined in a single web. What you call now may be just a crossing of echoes from other times. Tesla said that reality resembles a symphony, and each of us is a note echoing in the infinite music. But have you ever wondered if you have the power to change the melody, or if you're doomed to play the same note over and over again? This question isn't just philosophical, it's personal. It's about your life, about your future, which may already be written, just waiting for its time to unfold before your eyes. What if even the feeling of starting something new, of beginning a relationship, of embarking on a project, or dreaming of a different future, were nothing more than a variation of the same script, lived 1,000 times before? Isn't that precisely what we feel in déjà vu? As if the veil fell for a split second and the soul said, "I've been there before?" You might try to console yourself by saying that this is all just a figment of your imagination. But deep down, there's a suspicion that perhaps Tesla was right. And this suspicion won't leave you alone, because it shakes the deepest pillar of your existence, the belief that you're moving forward. If you've made it this far, you've already realized that this first crack in the idea of time opens up an abyss that's difficult to face, but it's only the beginning. Because if we accept that time is a vibrational cycle, we need to ask ourselves, what does it mean to grow old, to dream, to love, to suffer? What does it mean to exist if each moment can be merely an echo of something that never ended? And here's the crux. If this is already making you uncomfortable, brace yourself, because what follows won't just be a reflection. It will be an even deeper dive into how Tesla saw the human being, not as a solitary creator, but as an antenna tuning into the invisible. And if this idea is already disturbing, wait until you see what it means to perceive yourself, not as the author of your own life, but as a receiver of something greater, vibrating within and without. Have you ever felt like something invisible, almost imperceptible, is guiding the course of your life as if there were a secret frequency you were tuned to without realizing it? Nikola Tesla believed exactly this. For him, the human being was not just a physical body, but a living antenna, capable of capturing and transmitting vibrations that shape what we call reality. This idea may seem distant, but it's perhaps closer than you think. Think about simple moments in your day. You enter a room and immediately feel a heaviness in the air, as if time has slowed down. Nothing was said, no one needed to explain, but you sense a tension that alters your mood. In another moment, you find yourself among happy people, and suddenly, time seems to speed up. Everything flows with ease. What changed? It wasn't the clock, it was the frequency. You, without realizing it, adjusted your inner antenna to the vibration of that place. Tesla understood these phenomena as signs that human beings do not live in isolation, but are permanently connected to an invisible field. What we call the present is not something fixed, but merely the radio station to which our antenna is tuned. Just as a device captures waves that have always been in the air, our consciousness captures possible realities that already vibrate around us. This would explain why déjà vu occurs. For a brief moment, our tuning escapes the current frequency and captures another layer, revealing that we have experienced this before. It is not a lapse in memory, but a sign that we are in contact with repeating vibrations. Imagine a dream so vivid that days or weeks later, it seems to become real in eerie detail. Science calls this a coincidence, but Tesla saw these episodes as proof that our dreams are frequency adjustments. It's as if while we sleep, our antenna loses its rigidity and can pick up signals from other points in the field. Who hasn't dreamed something banal, a conversation, an encounter, a place, and then relived the exact same scene, as if receiving a transmission from life in advance? This experience may seem random, but perhaps it's evidence that our present isn't fixed. It's just the channel we're momentarily tuned to. Now imagine your life is like an old-fashioned radio, one that requires precision when turning the knob. Sometimes you hear static, other times the broadcaster's voice comes through clearly. Perhaps this is also true of our experiences. Sometimes we're aligned with the frequency of clarity, sometimes immersed in noise. What if it were possible to turn this knob consciously, choosing which reality to connect to? This is the provocation Tesla left us. But herein arises the conflict. If we have the ability to change the frequency, why do so many remain trapped in the same pain, the same mistakes, the same patterns? Imagine a person who keeps repeating destructive relationships. They promise themselves they'll be different, but before they know it, they're back in a cycle of suffering. This isn't a coincidence. They're tuned to a frequency that attracts this kind of experience, and until they learn to adjust their antenna, they'll continue to pick up the same signal, with different faces, but the same backstory. This is the power of vibration. It's not just about what we think or feel, but about what we're truly tuned to. You can tell yourself you want peace, but if you keep vibrating in anxiety and fear, your antenna isn't picking up the frequency of peace, only that of chaos. Another example is in the realm of opportunities. How many times have you heard someone say that they're always lucky, that doors seem to open naturally? Perhaps it's not luck, but attunement. This person is connected to a frequency where opportunities flow, while others remain stuck in the frequency of scarcity and resistance. Tesla believed that everything is energy, and if everything is energy, every reality already exists in potential. It's up to consciousness to choose which one to align with. But here comes the most disturbing aspect. Most of us live like unregulated antennas. We absorb vibrations from the environment, from people, from the news, without realizing that we are becoming passive receivers. What if much of your life were not the result of conscious choices, but of transmissions you picked up without realizing it? How many of your fears were born from signals that weren't yours, but that you absorbed from others? How many desires are truly authentic, and how many were merely echoes of a collective frequency you didn't question? This is where Tesla's reflection becomes even more uncomfortable. If we are antennas, then what we call self may not be as independent as we think. When you feel anger for no apparent reason, is it your own? Or is it just a signal picked up from the field you're in? When you're filled with enthusiasm around creative people, was that motivation born within you, or did it simply reverberate because your antenna tuned in? This leads us to an essential question. Who's really in control? You, or the frequencies passing through you? But don't think this condemns you to powerlessness. Quite the contrary. Recognizing yourself as an antenna is the first step toward realizing that, like any device, you can be adjusted. The problem is that no one teaches us how to make this adjustment. We grow up believing we're in control, when in fact, we react to invisible signals. However, Tesla asserted that human beings can learn to calibrate their own frequency. This is the key to freedom, not denying that we are receivers, but learning to choose what we receive and what we transmit. If you still doubt this, consider everyday situations. Have you ever thought about someone and, a few minutes later, they called or texted? This isn't magic, it's resonance. Your antenna picked up a vibration already active at that moment, and the contact manifested as confirmation. How many times have you felt that something bad was about to happen, and it actually did? How many times have you felt that this place isn't safe, even without any rational proof? These perceptions don't arise out of nowhere. They are signals picked up by your antenna. What we call intuition may just be the purest form of attunement to frequencies that the logical mind hasn't yet learned to translate. And here arises the suspense. If we are capable of capturing these frequencies without realizing it, what else could we capture if we learn to consciously tune our antenna? How many realities already exist around us, just waiting for us to choose to listen? Perhaps the lives we desire are already vibrating in other layers, but we remain stuck in static because we never learned to turn the dial. This is the provocation Tesla left us, and it paves the way for even deeper reflection. Because if each of us is an antenna that captures and transmits, then our choices, thoughts, and emotions don't belong solely to us. They reverberate, influence, and spread. What you transmit can reach others, shape environments, and even alter the perception of time. Think about how minutes drag by when you're anxious, and how hours disappear when you're passionate or inspired. Time bends to frequency. The question that remains is, Do we truly have the power to adjust this frequency, or are we simply prisoners of a tuning already imposed on us? This is the tension that has stayed with us so far. What if the life you live today isn't entirely yours, but merely the station your antenna is tuned to? What would happen if you learned to change the channel? What worlds could you access? What stories could you rewrite? The answer to these questions can be both liberating and terrifying, but they're impossible to escape once you realize the truth. And if you feel this unease growing within you, brace yourself, because the next question will be even more disturbing. If our choices are merely captured vibrations, could the much-prized freedom we believe we have be nothing more than an illusion? This is the crossroads Tesla leaves us at, a crossroads where the notion of free will begins to unravel before our eyes. What if I told you that the freedom you so defend may not exist in the way you believe? This provocation isn't just philosophical, but stems from scientific experiments and reflections that confront us with a frightening paradox. Perhaps what we call free will is nothing more than an illusion carefully maintained so that we continue to believe we're in control. What if your choices, the ones you consider genuine and personal, were already determined before you even thought about them? The mind likes to believe it's the conductor of life, but with each new discovery we realize it may just be a passenger on a train whose destination has already been set. Tesla, long before modern laboratories, intuited that our thoughts didn't arise from nothing. He said they were waves, frequencies captured from a larger field. This insight resonates with recent discoveries in neuroscience. In classic experiments, researchers recorded brain activity that anticipated motor decisions before the person was even consciously aware of them. Imagine, seconds before you decide to raise your hand, your brain had already sent the movement signal. So, who decided? You or the mechanism operating behind your consciousness? This simple observation undermines the idea that we are the absolute authors of our lives. But if we're not in control, who or what is? Now close your eyes for a moment and recall the promises you made to yourself. How many times have you sworn you would change your behavior, that you wouldn't repeat the same mistake, that this time it would be different, and yet you ended up falling into the same cycle, almost as if something greater was pushing you in the familiar direction? Is this simply a weakness of will, or is it proof that our choices are echoes of repeating vibrational patterns? If you've ever felt the weight of being unable to escape a repetition, no matter how consciously you felt about it, then you've experienced firsthand the feeling that perhaps free will isn't so free after all. But here a disturbing pattern emerges. If our choices are an illusion, why are we so proud of them? Why do we cling to the idea of autonomy? Perhaps because without this belief life would seem unbearable. The feeling of being trapped in invisible gears would be a blow too painful to bear. The illusion of freedom would then be a psychological protection, a veil that prevents us from seeing how conditioned we are. But wouldn't it also be a missed opportunity? Wouldn't it be precisely by tearing this veil that we could finally achieve a greater freedom than we think we have? The conflict becomes more intense when we realize that life seems to repeat not only our actions, but also our thoughts. How many times have you found yourself ruminating on the same ideas, reliving the same memories, repeating the same internal dialogues? It's as if your mind were programmed to spin in circles. What if this programming wasn't a defect, but part of a vibrational cycle that keeps us on the same path until we learn something? Here a new question arises. What is learning really? Is learning about changing patterns or simply recognizing that we're stuck in them? The curious thing is that even mundane situations reveal this invisible prison. Think about the autopilot of your routine. You wake up, pick up your phone, repeat the same gestures, drink the same coffee, take the same route. You call it normal life, but in reality it's a repetitive ritual you perform without thinking. Where is the freedom in this process? What if the big decisions in your life, marriage, career, financial choices, were just more sophisticated versions of the same automatism? Wouldn't it be frightening to admit that perhaps even the moments we consider great are nothing more than variations on a script written on another level? Now, let me turn the tables. What if true free will wasn't about choosing between two predetermined options, but about awakening to the fact that we are merely reacting to invisible stimuli? Perhaps freedom isn't about choosing, but about perceiving. Isn't this the most revolutionary point of Tesla's thinking? He didn't just want to show us that time is a cycle, or that we are vibrational antennas. He wanted us to see that consciousness, upon awakening, can emerge from passivity, and ultimately alter the frequency it receives. But the question remains, are we prepared for this responsibility? This dilemma isn't just intellectual, it's deeply emotional. Imagine a person trapped in an abusive relationship who consistently attracts partners with the same patterns. They believe they're choosing, but they're just repeating themselves. Now think of someone who never succeeds financially, no matter how hard they work. They think they're making the wrong decision, but perhaps they're simply vibrating at the frequency of scarcity. These are everyday examples of how freedom can be a cruel illusion. What you might call personal failure may actually be imprisonment in a vibrational pattern that hasn't yet been recognized. And then comes the surprise. Perhaps it's not the universe that imprisons us, but ourselves. Our thoughts, emotions, and beliefs create a field that keeps us connected to the same experiences. We're like radios always tuned to the same station, complaining about the music playing without realizing we could turn the knob. But can we really? This is the question that divides fear from hope. If we can change the frequency, then we have more power than we imagine. But if we can't, we're condemned to eternal repetition. Now think about the feeling of déjà vu. You're somewhere, someone says something, and suddenly everything seems to have already happened. This moment isn't just a psychological curiosity. It can be the crack through which you see the cycle repeating itself. Déjà vu isn't an illusion, but evidence. What if every time you experience it, the universe were trying to tell you, wake up, you've been through this before. It's time for a change. But how many of us stop to reflect on this? Most of the time, we laugh it off and move on, wasting the message. Couldn't this be one of the biggest signs that we're asleep? Modern science, especially quantum physics, also sheds light on this enigma. Experiments show that the observer influences the observed, that reality adjusts to the attention given to it. This means that the simple act of observing is already a power. But if this is so, why do we insist on feeling like victims of circumstance? Why do we continue to believe that our choices are small, when in fact each intention is a ripple reverberating in the fabric of time? Perhaps because we still cannot bear the weight of responsibility. Recognizing power is recognizing that there is no longer any excuse. What if you start asking yourself now, what patterns have I been repeating without realizing it? This simple question can be a breaking point, but it requires courage. Because by looking at the repetition head-on, you may discover that you're not living a single life, but reliving old chapters in a new guise. Isn't that despairing, or can it be liberating? The answer depends on how you approach this revelation. But make no mistake, awakening to this paradox is no easy task. Our brains have been trained to love the familiar, even if the familiar hurts. We'd rather repeat familiar suffering than risk the unknown. And that's precisely why free will becomes an illusion. Not because it doesn't exist at all, but because we rarely dare to exercise it to its fullest. We are creatures of habit, and habit is the most comfortable prison in the world. Are you willing to break out of it? If there's one thing Tesla left us, it was the provocation that we are more than we think we are. He saw human beings as antennas, yes, but also as potential creators of new frequencies. The problem is that to create, you have to awaken, and awakening hurts. It's like opening your eyes to full light after years of darkness. The brightness can blind, but it also reveals. How many are ready to face this light? This is the crossroads we now find ourselves at, and there's no turning back. If you've understood this far, you already know that the concept of freedom you learned as a child doesn't stand the test of reality. Free will, as you knew it, may not exist, but there's something beyond. Something deeper, the freedom to awaken to cycles, to see patterns, and consciously choose to shift our vibration. This isn't the freedom we were taught, but perhaps it's the only freedom that truly exists. What if your entire life up until now has been just a rehearsal for this moment? What will you do with this revelation? Will you continue to believe the comfortable illusion, or will you dare to seek the uncomfortable truth? This decision, paradoxically, may be the first truly free choice you will ever make. What if this is the true beginning of freedom? Have you ever stopped to think that your mind might not belong to you alone? That your thoughts, your emotions, and even your choices might be deeply intertwined with those of thousands of people around you, even if you're not aware of it? Tesla believed that human beings were not isolated entities, but part of a collective organism, like cells that, when vibrating together, form a single body. This idea may seem abstract, but the more we observe the world, the more we realize its reality. Imagine, for example, entering a packed stadium moments before a major final. The air vibrates, your heart races, your breathing becomes more intense. Nothing has changed within you biologically in seconds, but you are enveloped by the collective field of thousands of people. This energy is so powerful that it changes the way time is felt, how decisions are made, and how emotions explode. You may not realize it, but your inner antenna is no longer tuned to itself. It is tuned to the collective chorus that resonates like an invisible wave. Modern research surprisingly confirms this. Scientists at Princeton, in the so-called Global Consciousness Project, placed random number generators in different parts of the world to measure whether large collective events could influence seemingly chaotic patterns. The result was disturbing. In moments of great global commotion, such as terrorist attacks or worldwide celebrations, random numbers stopped being so random. It was as if humanity's collective mind had the power to influence the behavior of machines. This kind of evidence lends weight to what Tesla already intuited. Thoughts and emotions are not confined within the human skull, but propagate like intertwining waves, creating fields capable of shaping reality. Now think about your own life. How many times have you felt the mood of a room change as soon as someone entered? Perhaps a person charged with anger, capable of weighing down the air with their mere presence. Or, conversely, someone so light and enthusiastic that they seem to illuminate everything around them. This isn't just a psychological impression, it's a vibrational transmission. When groups of people meet, they create shared fields that can uplift or crush. Science calls this emotional resonance. Tesla would call it collective vibration, but there's an even deeper point to consider. If every thought you have vibrates, and if those vibrations spread, then you're not just influenced, but you also influence. Every negative emotion you harbor not only affects your mental health, but becomes part of a broader field that reinforces patterns of fear and repetition in society. Likewise, every thought of clarity and every act of compassion reverberates beyond your control, influencing even people you'll never meet. This means that the responsibility of each consciousness is far greater than we imagine. We're not just individuals trying to survive. We're nodes in a vast vibrational fabric. Everyday stories reveal this power. During World War II, when entire cities gathered in silent prayer for specific days, reports showed unexpected drops in planned bombing raids, as if something unseen had altered the sequence of events. While some of this can be explained by military strategy, many witnesses insisted that a greater force was at work, the vibration of millions of minds in unison. More recently, studies of collective meditation have shown significant reductions in violence in cities when large groups of people gathered for peace. In Washington, D.C. in the 1990s, an experiment brought together meditators for weeks. The results, published in local newspapers and scientific journals, indicated a nearly 25% drop in violent crime during that period. What can explain this if not the power of a collective vibration that restructures the urban landscape? And here comes the unexpected. When we think of change, we usually imagine it as something individual, one person silently transforming their life. But Tesla saw infinitely greater potential when many vibrated together. He believed that, just as sound waves can reinforce each other until they shatter glass, aligned consciousnesses could break the cycles that bind humanity. If each mind is an antenna, imagine millions of them emitting the same frequency. The field wouldn't just be altered, it would be recreated. The question that arises is, why haven't we yet harnessed this power consciously? Perhaps because we fear the power it holds. If we accept that our collective emotions shape the world, we must take responsibility, not only for what we do in secret, but for what we feel together. And this responsibility is heavy. Look around you. News of war, crises, hate speech that spreads like wildfire. All of this is not just the result of political decisions. It is a vibration fueled by the collective. When millions vibrate with fear or anger, the global field bends to these frequencies. Is it a coincidence that periods of economic crisis are accompanied by increases in mental and social illnesses? Or are we simply reaping what we transmit as humanity? Now let me tell you something that might surprise you. The University of California study revealed that emotions can be contagious on social media, even without physical contact. Negative posts increase the likelihood of new negative posts among online friends, while positive messages generate chains of enthusiasm. If this happens in a digital space, Imagine the scale when we talk about vibrations emitted by billions of connected minds. The internet, in this sense, is merely the visible reflection of something Tesla already knew invisibly. We are interconnected by frequencies that cannot be turned off. But here lies the micro-conflict we cannot avoid. If the collective has this power, where does that leave individuality? Are you still the master of your life, or just a cell following the impulse of the masses? This is an uncomfortable question because it shows that freedom is not only personal, but also depends on what the collective decides to vibrate. You can try to maintain your inner peace, but if you are surrounded by people immersed in chaos, you will inevitably be affected. The solution is not to isolate yourself, but to learn to vibrate so intensely that your frequency begins to alter that of others, like a flame that sets the candles ablaze around it. Imagine a small group, perhaps 10 people, gathered with clarity and purpose. Now expand that image to 1,000, then to millions. The field would shift on a planetary scale. This is not a distant dream, but a concrete possibility. Studies in quantum physics have already shown that particles separated by absurd distances can influence each other instantaneously. If this is possible in the subatomic world, why would it be impossible in human consciousness? Isn't the so-called collective consciousness merely an amplified reflection of this same law of interconnection? And if all this is true, we must admit a disturbing conclusion. The future of humanity depends not only on leaders or technologies, but on the vibrational state we choose to nurture together. Tesla once said that the day humanity understands the power of vibration will be the day it will change the course of history. Perhaps that day hasn't come yet, because we insist on believing we are separate individuals, each struggling alone. But the truth is, we are entangled in an invisible web. When one node in the network vibrates, the entire structure moves. Now I ask you, how many times have you unconsciously contributed to the weight of the collective field? How many times has your anger fueled the anger of others? How many times has your sadness reinforced the sadness of others? And conversely, how many times has your genuine joy illuminated entire environments? If you've experienced this, you know it's not theory, it's experience, it's real. The question is, what are you willing to convey from now on? Because if individual awakening is already transformative, collective awakening is revolutionary. It has the potential to break not only personal patterns, but the very cycles that have bound humanity for centuries. But do we really want this? Are we prepared to shoulder the burden of a freedom that is no longer just mine or yours, but ours? This is the crossroads we find ourselves at. And if we choose to continue vibrating in unconscious repetition, we will perpetuate the same cycles of destruction. But if we consciously choose to shift the frequency together, we can experience something Tesla only glimpsed, a humanity capable of breaking the cycle and creating a new field of reality. And it is precisely here that the question arises that will take us deeper. Would even this collective awakening be enough to escape the prison of time? Or would it merely create an even larger, more sophisticated, but equally closed cycle? If the answer is the latter, then perhaps the true key lies in understanding not only the power of the collective, but also the abysses of the cosmos that defy our logic, like black holes and portals that distort the very fabric of reality. Have you ever wondered why the universe seems to hold its greatest secrets in the most extreme places? Tesla believed that nothing in the cosmos was arbitrary, and that even the most frightening phenomena, such as black holes or possible interdimensional portals, were signs that time and space don't work the way we've been taught to believe. These enigmas aren't just distant curiosities in the night sky. They are perhaps giant mirrors of what's happening inside us too. The universe, as Tesla claimed, vibrates in patterns. And if these patterns can be distorted on cosmic scales, what prevents them from also being altered on the scale of consciousness? Imagine a black hole. This invisible, silent, and relentless entity is capable of trapping even light. For traditional physics, it is the end of any path, the frontier of destruction. But for Tesla, this limit could be something more, a demonstration that time is not absolute, that it can be curved, slowed down, or even suspended. Scientists have already proven that, around black holes, time flows differently. Minutes near this abyss can be equivalent to years for those observing from the outside. What does this tell us? That time is not solid, but plastic, elastic, moldable. If in the cosmos it can be distorted, why couldn't it also be transformed by the vibration of the mind? Now consider something even more uncomfortable. What happens inside the so-called singularity, the heart of a black hole, is an absolute mystery. There, the known laws of physics break down. Space and time cease to exist as we understand them. For some scientists, this is proof that time can simply cease to exist. Tesla would see this not just as a cosmic catastrophe, but as a symbolic opportunity. If time can dissolve, then it is not a fundamental pillar of reality, but merely a layer, perhaps a vibrational illusion that keeps our lives trapped in cycles. What if true awakening lay in crossing this barrier, not with spaceships or technology, but with consciousness? This hypothesis may sound far-fetched, but consider how it connects to practical life. How many times have you experienced moments when time seemed to disappear? During an intense experience of pain or ecstasy, during an artistic creation, during the contemplation of something grand. In these moments, you don't live in minutes or hours, but in a suspension in which time loses its power. Could these moments be small glimpses of what happens on a larger scale, when time collapses in the face of more intense forces? Tesla believed so. And then come the even more provocative enigmas. Wormholes, or as science prefers to call them, Einstein-Rosen bridges. Theoretical tunnels that could connect distant points in space and even different eras of time. To most people, this sounds like science fiction. But what if it doesn't? What if these passages actually exist and are a natural expression of the universe, reminding us that time can be traversed and space can be circumvented? Tesla, who saw everything in terms of energy and vibration, wouldn't consider this impossible. He would say that such portals are expressions of the same vibrational field that sustains all things, from the stars to the human mind. What would happen if we discovered that just as hidden passages exist in the cosmos, so too do doors exist within consciousness, capable of transporting us beyond the prison of time? Could lucid dreams, déjà vu experiences, and sudden intuitions be precisely such breaches? Small internal passages to layers of reality we normally cannot reach. This possibility is disturbing because it suggests that the external universe and the internal universe are reflections of each other. The black hole in the sky and the abyss of the mind would be, in essence, the same thing, portals beyond the illusion of time. But there's one detail that makes all this even more intriguing. Ancient civilizations, long before modern physics, already spoke of these portals. The Egyptians described cosmic doors that could lead to other dimensions. The Hindus spoke of samsara and moksha, cycles and liberation, comparing life to a labyrinth from which escape is only possible through awakened consciousness. Buddhism saw emptiness not as an absence, but as the plenitude that dissolves time and space. Is it a coincidence that so many different traditions have pointed in the same direction? Or have they all already intuited what science is only now beginning to demonstrate? Consider the wheel of life described in Buddhism: birth, death, and rebirth in infinite cycles. This wheel is similar to the orbit of planets, similar to the repetition of galaxies in spiral patterns, similar even to electrons orbiting atomic nuclei. Everything seems to repeat itself in cycles. Is the universe telling us at every scale that life is circular? That we are trapped in repetitions until we learn to escape? What if black holes, far from being mere threats, were symbols of escape from this cycle? Cosmic reminders that the prison of time has secret doors? But here arises a question we cannot ignore. If these portals exist, why are we still stuck? Do we not know how to access them? Or simply do we not want to? Perhaps the truth is more uncomfortable. It is easier to repeat than to cross. Crossing requires courage because it means abandoning the known. Imagine someone facing a black hole. Instinct tells us, escape. But what if, precisely there, lay the passage to something greater? Isn't it the same with consciousness? We run from crises, fears, and pain without realizing that they are the singularities that could take us beyond. And here comes an unexpected fact. Astronomers have already captured mysterious signals from deep space called FRBs, vast radio bursts that last milliseconds but release more energy than the sun does in an entire day. No one knows exactly how to explain their origin. Some say they are natural phenomena of collapsing stars. Others dare to speculate that they may be signals from distant civilizations. Tesla, as early as the late 19th century, recorded enigmatic signals in his radio experiments and believed they could come from extraterrestrial intelligences. He was ridiculed for this. Today, science no longer rules out this hypothesis. What does this mean? That we may already be receiving echoes from other realities, but we still don't know how to interpret them. What if these signs are, in some way, reminders that we are not alone, that the very fabric of the universe is trying to show us that there are ways out of this cycle? This idea is uncomfortable, yet deeply seductive. It opens the possibility that we are not definitive prisoners, but merely sleepy travelers who have not yet learned to read the signs. Now turn to your life. How many times have you felt like you were facing a personal black hole, a situation that seemed to swallow everything around it? Loss of someone, financial crisis, professional failure, illness. These moments seem destructive to us, but what if they were also portals? What if precisely within these radical experiences lurked the possibility of crossing over to a new level of consciousness? Pain, then, would be the psychological equivalent of the cosmic singularity, the point at which known time dissolves and transformation becomes inevitable. It is at this point that the narrative returns to Tesla. For him, the key was never just machines or equations, but the ability of consciousness to recognize its vibrational nature. Black holes, wormholes, cosmic signals, all would be merely magnified metaphors for what is already within us. What the universe shows out there is a reflection of what we need to awaken within. If there are portals in the cosmos, there are also portals in the mind, and awakening consists of learning to pass through them. What if the time you so fear losing isn't a thread that slips away, but a prison that can be left behind? This is the provocation Tesla left us. The entire universe, with its violent and mysterious forces, seems to tell us that reality is much more flexible than we think. What remains for each of us is the courage to look beyond fear, beyond repetition, and ask, am I ready to cross the threshold? What if everything you believed about time, your choices, and even your own life were merely a reflection of repeated vibrations sustained by you and the collective? This is the question that echoes after all the journey thus far. Tesla believed that the key was not in mastering the external universe with machines, but in learning to transform the frequency of one's own consciousness. And now, after reflecting on the illusion of time, the role of the mind as an antenna, the fragility of freedom, and the power of the collective, we arrive at the most important point: what to do with all this. Because knowledge without action is just another form of repetition. True transformation begins when the idea is translated into practice. The first step is observation. It seems simple, but it's revolutionary. Write down the patterns you repeat daily, the recurring thoughts, the emotions that always return to the same situations. Write down when you feel déjà vu, when you realize you're reliving a cycle, when you dream something that later happens. By recording, you stop being just part of the repetition and begin to witness it. This breaks the automatism. Ask yourself, how many times have I experienced this same emotion? How many times have I been in this same situation? This awareness is the first crack in the wall of the cycle. The second step is to create moments of silence. Tesla said that in stillness we can capture more subtle frequencies. Set aside 5 or 10 minutes a day to simply breathe and observe. It's not about erasing thoughts, but about seeing them without getting caught up in them. It's in this space that you begin to realize you're not obligated to always tune into the same channel. It's like slowly turning the radio knob of your consciousness. At first, there's only noise, but gradually a new frequency begins to reveal itself. The third step is the practice of conscious intention. Before starting your day, define what frequency you want to vibrate at. If your tendency is fear, choose to vibrate with confidence. If your tendency is haste, choose to vibrate with patience. This decision isn't just mental. It manifests in every gesture, every look, every word. Intention is vibration. By sustaining it, you begin to alter not only your personal reality, but also the collective field around you. The fourth step is cultivating elevated emotional states. Science has shown that emotions like gratitude, compassion, and love even reorganize the heartbeat, creating coherence in the body and, consequently, in the field we emit. Practicing gratitude is not a moralistic lesson, but a frequency adjustment. Start by giving thanks for small things. Notice how your body changes, how your breathing becomes lighter. This is the exercise of vibrating consciously, not as a reaction, but as a creation. The fifth step is to expand this practice to the collective. Talk to people close to you, share your reflections, and encourage them to observe their own patterns. You don't need to convince them with speeches. Just be an example. Your vibration speaks louder than your words. An environment changes when someone decides to sustain a higher frequency, and this spreads to others. Thus, you begin to be not just a receiver, but an active transmitter, capable of resonating across a network. The sixth step is to use dreams as training. Before going to sleep, affirm to yourself that you want to realize your dreaming. Keep a notebook by your bed to record it. This may seem insignificant, but it's a powerful exercise. If you can wake up in the middle of a dream, you'll also be able to wake up in the midst of the repetitions of waking life. Dreams are the laboratory of consciousness, the place where we test the freedom that, little by little, we will learn to apply in our daily lives. The seventh step is concrete action. Transformation isn't limited to the mental or emotional realm. If you realize you're stuck in relationship cycles, take a different action, however small. You always react with silence, try speaking up. If you always react with anger, try calm. If you constantly repeat financial choices that harm you, consciously change one of them. Every small, different action is a signal to the universe that you're shifting your frequency. The eighth step is to understand that the process is collective. No individual transformation can be sustained without influencing the whole. This means that the work you do on yourself reverberates in the world. Every emotion you transform within yourself alters the field of humanity. This realization is powerful because it shows that you are never alone. Each individual awakening is a spark that helps illuminate the invisible network of consciousness. The ninth step is to accept imperfection. You will fail, you will repeat patterns, you will fall into familiar cycles. This isn't a sign of failure, but rather that repetition is trying to teach you something. Each time you return to the same point, ask a different question. Instead of blaming yourself, ask, what haven't I learned yet? What is this repetition trying to teach me? This simple shift in attitude is already a way to break out of the cycle. The 10th step is to take responsibility for what you transmit. Tesla said that everything is vibration. This means that nothing is neutral. Every thought, every emotion, every gesture creates waves. Ask yourself daily, what am I emitting today? Am I reinforcing collective fear or contributing clarity and presence? This responsibility may seem heavy, but it is also liberating, because it shows you that you have much greater power than you imagined. What if we all began applying these steps one at a time with patience and discipline? Imagine millions of people observing their patterns, adjusting their intentions, vibrating in higher states, sharing these practices, and awakening in their dreams as well. What would happen to the collective field of humanity? Would we see less violence, less repetition of tragedies, less imprisonment in cycles? This may be the true path to global transformation. Not through political decrees, not through wars, not through machines, but through the awakening of collective consciousness. This is the final message Tesla left us, even without saying it in such direct words. He believed that humanity would only change when it understood that time, space, and matter are merely expressions of energy, frequency, and vibration, and that each of us is an active part of this symphony. The question is, will you continue to believe that you are just a solitary note, repeating the same sound forever? Or will you accept that you can choose to vibrate differently and thus change the entire melody? This is the invitation I leave you now, not as a distant theory, but as a concrete practice. Observe your cycles, create silence, set intentions, cultivate elevated emotions, share with others, awaken in dreams, act differently, accept imperfection, take responsibility. Repeat this process every day. This is the strategic plan, simple but transformative. It's not easy, but it is possible. And every small step taken today changes not only your life, but also the collective future. If this message touched you, allow yourself to take action. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share your experiences or questions in the comments. If you prefer, do so anonymously. The important thing is to participate, because every word, every interaction, every reflection is part of this collective awakening that has already begun. The future is not just something that awaits us. It is something we create together now, and you are an essential part of this creation. Choose to vibrate consciously. Choose to break the cycle. Choose to awaken.